All right, 7 o'clock in the morning. We're all here. Well, we have a terrific morning planned for you. We have 3 wonderful speakers, and I know that some people are just eating now, but we're ready to begin. Well, I have a question I could ask. If you could quiet down, please. My question is, for how many people is this your first Silicon Valley prayer breakfast? Wow, still a number of people. Well, this is our 23rd year of having this event, and this is the biggest one ever. In fact, we've had a waiting list, and thank you so much for offering spots at your table. Well, for those who haven't experienced the Silicon Valley Prayer Breakfast, let me give you an idea of what it's about and what you can expect. Creating connections that count is the tagline that we use. Creating connections that count. By that we mean 2 things. We mean connecting with each other. Networking is an important part of this morning's activities. So I hope you have a chance to meet people around your table, maybe people that you don't know. And after the event, we'll have at least 30 minutes, maybe longer than that, to get a chance to meet other people in this room. There are some amazing people here. So networking is an important part of what we do. But most important is connecting with God. And that's what we encourage people to do. We believe, those of us that help organize this event, believe that the most important decision we can make in life is where to put our trust and our faith. Is it in God, or is it in something else? So our goal at the Silicon Valley Prayer Breakfast is to help encourage conversations about faith and conversations about God. We do that by inviting some inspiring speakers that have great stories to tell. And although our speakers all will talk about how God has worked in their life from a Christian perspective, this event is open to everyone, no matter where you are in your spiritual journey and no matter what you believe. You know, we call this a prayer breakfast. That is because we celebrate prayer and we celebrate faith. But knowing that we have a diverse audience, we don't put anyone on the spot. We don't ask you to pray around your tables. But we do celebrate prayer. So if you happen to be here and you're just curious about faith, I want you to relax, be comfortable, and you have a unique opportunity to hear how God has worked in the lives of our speakers. The theme today is finding joy in a challenging world. Now, doesn't that sound a little bit unusual? Joy in a challenging world? I don't think anyone can deny that we live in a challenging world, and that's why in my opening I wanted to pray for our country and for our leaders. There's certainly a big task ahead. Lots of challenges, but we also face personal challenges, right? We face broken relationships, abuse, poverty, death, economic difficulties. We face personal challenges. Either you're going through one right now, you're coming out of one, or I can guarantee you will go into a challenge of one sort or another. So finding joy is a question and a challenge. We're going to have that opportunity to talk a little bit around the tables after we hear our speakers give their talks about how they found joy in very uniquely different, challenging situations. So before I introduce our first speaker, I want to thank some very important people for helping make this event possible. And if you could hold your applause, I'll ask them to stand after it, after I announce their names or the groups. So first of all, we have a group of patrons that provide substantial financial support to help make this event more affordable for each one of us. And they're listed in the program. We also have corporate sponsors, a number of corporate sponsors that also offset the cost of the event today. And we have some great nonprofit sponsors who have some tables in the hallway. They provide outstanding community service and volunteer opportunities if anyone is interested. And finally, but very importantly, is a large group of volunteers, our committee that helps organize this, and I'm just a representative of this group that works long hours, a lot of detail to make this event happen. So if I've mentioned, if you're part of one of those groups, please stand and let's all give them a round of applause. Please stand. Well, thank you so much. So now I want to introduce our first speaker, Vanessa Russell. And Vanessa is a remarkable person. I've gotten to know her over the last few months. She's a senior sales executive at Cisco Systems and the founder of a nonprofit organization called Love Never Fails. She's also the wife of Tim Russell, who is here with us today, and the mother of 7 children. I'm exhausted just thinking about all that she does. Well, Vanessa faced some challenging times growing up. Abuse, poverty characterized her childhood and through her teenage years. But in spite of all that she went through, Vanessa had an aptitude for learning and for technology. After graduation from college, she started working for Pac Bell and held increasingly responsible positions at companies like Pure Logic, FTP Software, and Excite at Home. And as I said today, she's a senior sales executive at Cisco. Although she grew up with no faith in her family, she found God, and God changed her outlook and her life. God often uses the challenges that we have to help other people who may be facing similar challenges. And that's exactly what happened to Vanessa. She founded Love Never Fails, which is dedicated to the restoration, education, and protection of young people in the risk of getting involved in domestic sex trafficking. The ministry addresses the traffic survivors' need for safety and wholeness. The nonprofit provides housing, mentoring, workshop development, and even a coaching ministry for men to help them find purpose and live by godly principles. Of particular note, Love Never Fails is engaged in a statewide preventive education collaborative called Protect. And if you want to hear more, learn more about Love Never Fails, I suggest that you visit their display table, which is in the hallway. The title of Vanessa's talk is Joy in Being, Not Doing. Please welcome Vanessa Russell.
I am so grateful to be here and have an opportunity to share a little bit with you about my personal story and my journey. That journey started in the 70s during a turbulent time. I was born actually in the East Coast to 2 parents that were hippies. And they were creative too, actually a lot of positive characteristics, very innovative, very creative, interracial couple, but there were some challenges during that time, and there were a lot of drugs, and there was a lot of partying, and because of that, there was a lot of abuse. And as a result, they divorced when I was 2 years old. During that time of transition, my mother made the very challenging decision. It must have been very difficult for her at the age of 21 to place her daughter in foster care. But it was necessary for her as she went out as a single woman to pioneer the San Francisco Bay Area. And so she courageously went on and did that. She came back for me a couple months later, and she moved us permanently to San Francisco, to the Bernal Heights district. We left Florida with 1 suitcase in our hands. When we arrived to San Francisco, we lived with a couple of people and then finally landed our own flat. And that was, it was an exciting time, It was very challenging. There was a lot of poverty. We didn't have a lot of things, but we learned to do the best that we could with what we had. The drive to survive was great, and it made me hungry. It made me realize that I was only one step away from the streets. I was only one step away from having hunger pains. And so I began this journey of fighting for survival. At the age of 11, I landed my first job, and I haven't stopped working since. I also was involved in every extracurricular activity you could imagine. I was on the basketball team. I like to think I was the star shooter, but I was actually on the bench, but that's okay. I was in choir. I was on the dance team. I did everything. I was in a school government. I did everything you could imagine. And that sounds great. Only the reason why I was doing that was I was doing it to earn worth, because I didn't think I had any. Does anybody relate to that? And so as I went down this path of trying to earn my worth, I was accomplishing these amazing things, and I looked like I was this phoenix. And I thought I would wear this outfit to kind of show you what it felt like. I was this phoenix rising from the ashes. But actually, that was my persona by day. But by night, I was a scared little girl who was being raped by her boyfriend. And so there was this duality that was going on in my life, and this was at the age of 12. As I went on through my life, I kept thinking, if I just try harder, if I just work harder, I'll finally find the love that I always wanted. But that never happened in my childhood. I went on into my young adult life, and I continued to be an overachiever, promotion after promotion, being accepted to elite colleges, graduating from elite colleges, making six figures before the age of 30, purchasing my first home before the age of 30, and yet there was nothing. There was no worth. I didn't know my own value. And then in 2015, something happened. I'm sorry, 1995. I'm getting ahead of myself. 1995, I gave birth to my first child. And there was this thing that happened that was spiritual. I came to know love. Unconditional love. And I thought, I love this baby so much that I would give my life for him. He hasn't done anything to earn my love. And that got me thinking, if I could love this baby that way, is there somebody that loves me the same way? And so it sent me searching, and I started going to church and meeting all these great loving people, and eventually I gave my life to the Lord on April 27th, 2000. Yeah, it was, yeah. In my morning devotional today, it read, "Join the party." Isn't that something? And so the party began. And as I was partying, I kept thinking, you know what, this party is just too good. I kept getting back to my old ways of thinking. This party's too good. I've got to earn this party. So I started serving in the church. I'm going to clean the bathrooms. I'm going to be in the women's ministry. I'm going to be in the children's ministry. I'm going to do everything. So I was involved in like 15 ministries. I kid you not. And in the middle of that, God got a hold of me and he said, wait. I want to show you something. And he showed me like I was an infant child in his hands rocking me. And he said, this is where I want you to be. I haven't called you to do those 15 things. I've called you to be here as an infant child in my hands. Let me love you. And it was there that I began to realize that yes, I had all these gifts, and yes, I could do a lot of great things, but first, to be held as an infant child, to be loved, and to know joy in being and not doing. There's so many things that have transformed in my life since that time. Take, for example, marriage. I'm married to an awesome husband, Pastor Timothy Russell. And yes, yay. And we're newlyweds, 2 years in. And when I think about what marriage means to me today and what it meant to me before, it's completely changed. Before, it was a matter of status, so that I could be invited to parties and look like I was somebody and I was good enough to be with somebody walk into a party with my husband on my arm. But now I realize marriage is a gift that I get to have so that I have joy in my life. I get to have my best friend that I wake up to every morning. And that's awesome. Also, what I'm doing with Love Never Fails, as Skip shared. You know, we get to do a lot of great things, provide housing, prevention education, mentoring, job training. That sounds like a lot of doing, right? But I'm doing that because I know who I am. I'm doing that with so much joy and so much freedom because of the joy that I have inside. And guess what? When you're human trafficked, you actually believe the same lie I believed, which is that you have to earn your keep. You have to earn love. You see, so I had to get delivered from that lie before I could help others get delivered from it. And so these things have meaning. The thing that he's taught me to go to, the arms that he's taught me to go to, the holding and the receiving of his love, it has purpose. The joy has purpose because from here, I get to the doing that he's designed for my life. I get to the being that he's designed for my life. And I get to the knowing that my bio says I'm a senior leader at Cisco. I'm a mother of 7. I'm a founder of Love Never Fails. I'm all these things. I'm a senior pastor's wife. Wow. That's great, but you know what? I'm Vanessa. And I'm loved, and I'm valuable. And I hope that today you go away knowing that you are just as valuable and just as loved. Have a blessed morning.
Wonderful talk. Great job.
Thank you.
Very good.
Well, thank you so much. We can't earn God's love. I was particularly struck by when Vanessa said that she felt the unconditional love for her son, which is the love that God feels for us. Thank you, Vanessa. Well, now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Diane Flynn. And Diane has an enviable resume. Graduated from Stanford, earned an MBA from the Harvard Business School. And early in her career, she worked for the prestigious firm Boston Consulting Group, then moved to work as the marketing executive at Electronic Arts, the leading producer of electronic games. When she became a mom, she decided to make the hard decision to leave her fast-track career to raise her children. And as her children grew to independence, she decided to rejoin the workforce to continue her career. Not an easy decision after 15 years of absence. She took a position as the Chief Marketing Officer at GSV Labs, an accelerator for startup businesses here in Silicon Valley. In early 2015, Diane co-founded Reboot Excel to help women re-enter the workforce. And the organization's motto is to help women get current, connected, and confident. It clearly struck a chord and was an immediate success. And it has grown from a presence in Silicon Valley to 9 other cities across the nation, serving thousands of women. Although her bio sounds like a fairy tale, she faced challenges along the way. In her talk titled, My Unseen Bio, Diane plans to talk about those challenges and how her faith was pivotal in meeting them. Please welcome Diane Flynn.
Thank you, Vanessa, for those beautiful words. I'm going to stand behind the podium. Okay, as Skip shared, I have a public bio, but today I'm here to share my private bio, or my unseen bio, or the bio that even Google does not know. When I was 15, I was on the track team, and I went out for a run one day. And as I was running, I felt this intense pain and throbbing in my neck. I went home and I applied some heating pads, and I kind of watched it for a few weeks. But as I was in school, I was in 9th grade, it just got worse. And so my mom took me in, we saw the doctor. He said, you know, it looks like a cyst, let's get it out. So I went in for surgery, and when I woke up, the first thing I saw told me something was not good. As much as I love my brothers, seeing their 2 faces bedside, they had flown home from college, just didn't feel like a great sign. And that's when my dad told me I had cancer. I had cancer of the parotid gland, one of only 7 cases at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota at that time. And I faced about a year of surgeries where they told me my left side of my face may never work again. And all my pictures, I have my finger holding up my smile, because I always wanted to smile, but couldn't. Fortunately, as you can see, and praise God, I regained my nerves on my left side of my face. And then in my 20s, I had 2 young toddlers at home. And I had, as Skip mentioned, a full-time job that I loved. It just filled me. But I had enough stress to warrant about 7 years of chronic sinus infections. And it got to the point where something had to give. It was not going to be my toddlers, so my job took the back seat, and I, as Skip mentioned, stayed home for about 15 years raising my kids. A few years after I quit work, I had a 3rd child, my son Matthew, who's here today somewhere, if he got out of bed. I haven't seen him yet, so I'm making an assumption. He was born with some medical challenges and necessitated 6 different surgeries starting at 3 months. And then the good news, though, was that my parents, who lived in Minnesota at the time, I live here, were ever present. They were here for every surgery. My mom was always on a flight. People thought they lived here because they were here so often. Sadly, several years ago, she was out visiting, flew home for some elective knee surgery, and did not survive. And then a few years after that, my father had cancer, spoke to him every day on the phone, and he passed away from cancer. And that was about about 4 years ago. A few months after he passed away, I was diagnosed yet again with cancer, this time breast cancer. So why do I share all this? The reason I do is, as I was preparing these remarks, I reflected on my life and what has brought me the most meaning and what has really cemented my faith. And it's not any of the things that Skip read. Those are great. As Vanessa said, it's nice to have a resume. But when I think about who I am and what has shaped my character and what has built my faith, It's these times when I was down on my knees, literally not knowing the future, that I felt God's presence. And as I was preparing this, I journaled a lot during these difficult times. And I was reading through some of my journals. And there were two verses that kept coming up over and over from the age of 15. And I wanted to share them with you because I honestly think they are what got me through this. One is Romans 12:12. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. And the second is Romans 5:3. We rejoice in our suffering because suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. At the time of many of these challenges, I did not have great patience. My family will attest. Patience was not my gift. I didn't have a lot of joy at times. In fact, many times I was very angry at God. But I was faithful in prayer. And I do think that I learned to find joy and patience and perseverance in those times of struggle and triumph. Wouldn't it be nice to learn all this without the affliction? I learned that through affliction is when I most fully experienced God's presence. So how has God worked through some of these events? I'm just going to touch on a few ways. I believe my early childhood experience with cancer, along with my son's medical journey, is what resulted in me working for the last 16 years, and I still do today, as an advisor at Stanford Children's Hospital. I help families navigate their path, which is very difficult and challenging, and I help the hospital develop more family-centered practices and care. My sinus infections, as hard as they were at the time, those were my speed bump. I tend to be a little like Vanessa. I'm a doer. And I don't pause very often. My dad used to come out and he'd sit in the family room and he'd watch me scurry around. He said, Diane, don't you ever just sit and reflect. And the reality is, it's not my natural state. I need these speed bumps in my life to say, take a time out and just reflect and pray. Psalm 46:10 is one of my favorites too. Be still and know that I am God. And I have to keep being reminded to be still because, God gives us our unique personalities. And then lastly, I think the cancer I had 3 years ago was totally pivotal to what I'm doing today. The Reboot program was a result of a lot of months on the couch recuperating, and I did spend time in discernment and reflection and prayer. And what I felt God telling me, it was very clear. He told me that my life is more exhilarating when I help others more fully experience theirs. And I think that was the kind of vision that led me to Reboot. Because when I came back into the workforce, I felt there were a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know today's technologies. I didn't have a professional network. I didn't have a LinkedIn profile. And when I shared my story, I found I wasn't alone. There are a lot of women just like me who needed to upskill and develop confidence. So 4 amazing women who are here today took the call with me, and we've started Reboot. And now I get to wake up every morning filled with purpose. I get to use my talents, and most importantly, I get to change lives. And every week we hear from another woman who says, you've changed my life. And that is my purpose right now. My job is my ministry, and I feel so blessed to merge the two. And I hope that every day I honor God with how I treat people and serve. So what are the takeaways? 3 things I'd like to leave with you. 1, life is filled with tough times. No one escapes. If you're struggling with your career, with your health, with your kids, with loss, perhaps getting up in the morning is difficult, getting through the day is difficult, I want you to know that there is a source of strength that's available for the asking. It's very easy to seek God, and what I found personally is that the peace and the comfort and the wisdom that he provides is immeasurable. Second, who knows your unseen bio? I selectively share my bio each week with a group of my prayer partners who are also here today. Thank you. And that is a tremendous source of strength for me. I had the chance to meet with my pastor, John Ortberg, to prepare these talks, this talk, and he shared something I thought was really poignant. He said, when we share our public bios, we might impress others. But when we share our private bios, we connect with others. And we all need more connections, as Skip pointed out. People connect with our messes, not our successes. So I would just ask you to consider sharing your private bio with at least one trusted friend. And third, ask God for help on your unseen bio. Every day I try to ask, God, what are you teaching me? How do you want me to respond? I've learned to thank God in everything, not for everything, knowing that he can sharpen and shape me for any challenge and use it for his good. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful talk. Thanks so much, Diane. Many, many takeaways from that. I guess I was struck by a few things when, as you said, you went through affliction that cemented your faith. Good lesson in that. And as Diane said, we all have an unseen bio, and it is helpful when we can share that with a trusted friend. And it often is through affliction that we really get our relationship cemented with God. So thank you very much. Well, now I'd like to introduce our third speaker, Ron Johnson. In talking about challenges, Ron Johnson not only faced some major challenges, but faced the challenges publicly. Now, like Vanessa and Diane, Ron has an amazing resume. Graduated from Stanford University and the Harvard Business School, on the board of Stanford, and vice chair of the Stanford Hospital and Clinics, and high-level executive positions at Target, at Apple, and JCPenney. Now, I expect that many people here have probably visited an Apple store, right? Well, the Apple store and the Genius Bar were Ron's idea when he was a senior vice president at Apple. So let me put into context the environment when those stores were opened, and that was in May of 2001. Now, some of you may recall that there had been, through the 90s, chains of many computer stores, but by the late 1990s, early 2000, most of them had vanished, except for one, and that was Gateway. Remember the name Gateway? And they were quickly going out of business. So that was the environment when Ron made the decision to embark on the strategy of opening the Apple stores. And in a 2006 interview on the situation that Apple faced in 2001, Ron said this, and I quote, "Even though we had only 3% of the market, we're going to make this work. And here are 3 words that everybody asked. Are you crazy?" Well, crazy worked. The Apple stores now generate more sales per square foot than any other retail store in the world, including Tiffany's. Now that's business success. Well, the opposite happened when Ron took over as CEO of JCPenney in November of 2011. He attempted to turn around the behemoth retailer, which was struggling in a big way. He attempted to rebrand JCPenney. Unfortunately, the strategy was not given enough time to work, and Ron resigned after 17 months. It was a public embarrassment, as Ron's name was all over the newspaper. Some of you may have read that. So Ron has experienced great success and also some major challenges. He is in the process of making another career bet in a startup called Enjoy that seeks to reinvent the shopping experience for customers. So the title of Ron's talk is Daring to Stand in the Presence of God. Please welcome Ron Johnson. Well,
I hope that's a lucky 13, Skip. No. Listening to Vanessa and Diane, I'm reminded we each have our own pool of tears. For a lot of us guys, that's more metaphorical. It's that kind of deep sadness that comes from a challenge. For others, it's an actual physical tear. Vanessa, I'm so impressed. The challenges you grew up with, extreme poverty, violence, disadvantage. With God's help, you flourished, and you clearly flourished. So, for Diane, your personal health. At age 14, I don't know how old you are now, but I'm kidding. But your health, the health of your family, but you, with God's help, you flourished, which is great. I think for all of us, we have our own pool of tears, if you really are honest with yourself. It could be your working situation, it could be a relationship, it could be a mistake you made at some time in your past. We all sit beside them, and we each have a choice to make. We can either let those tears drown us in sorrow, or they can nourish us. And it's a fundamental decision I think we each have to make. My life has been incredibly blessed. I grew up in an affluent Christian family. I was raised from before I can recall to have an abiding faith in God. And to me, that faith is the word you use, Skip. It's trust. I've always had a deep confidence that God is good, and somehow God's goodness always triumphs. That belief is the greatest gift my parents gave to me. I had a chance to go to great schools. I've worked hard, but I've also been lucky. I joined Target at a time when it became Target, and got to work with a really great team of people to do that. I went to Apple at a time when Apple wasn't doing very well, but I had a chance to work with Steve and a lot of great leaders, many who are still there, and Apple flourished. A lot of us go work someplace, we work hard, we do great work, but it just doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't work out. But I'm not going to talk about those today. As Skip said, I'm going to talk about my pool of tears, and I had a really big one, and I had a really public pool of tears. And that was my time as the CEO of JCPenney. But I'd like you to leave with this fact, that God's ability to nourish, if you make the choice to let those tears nourish you, is absolutely unmatched. So about 6 years ago, I was announced as the 10th CEO of JCPenney. 100-year-old company. That means the average CEO had a tenure of over 10 years. After a dozen years at Apple, my job had become a hobby. We had opened stores in 13 countries around the world. They were all doing really well. It was easy. I wanted a challenge. So I took on this challenge to go run JCPenney. Nobody thought it was a good idea. Steve thought it was the dumbest idea he'd ever had. Many of you might know Bill Campbell. Bill, on 3 occasions, came to the house saying, Ron, you can't go. Even the week before I started. My wife, Karen, didn't like it. My 2 kids didn't like the fact that I was going to be commuting to Texas. My dad thought it was dumb. Nobody thought it was a good idea. But I wanted to do it, so I did. Right? And it actually, if you look back, it started out okay. The market cap of JCPenney the day I was announced rose by $1 billion, and the story was this Ron Johnson, this retail wonder boy, was leaving the most valuable company in the world to turn around a 100-year-old department store. It was a great story. And in typical Ron fashion, I went big and I went fast. I trusted my instincts. I've always had that faith. Well, my faith in God also applies to how I approach work. A mere 12 weeks after we started, I invited 3,000 people to New York, press, analysts, in a series of presentations. We told about our vision for the new JCPenney, and it was really at least the presentation was successful. The stock was now up $3 billion, or 75%. And all I'd done is deliver a presentation. Life was good. People seemed excited. The next day, we changed everything. We changed our pricing. We changed our branding. We started to remodel the stores. We brought in new merchandise. And sales went down, which we expected them to. You know, I believe in life sometimes you have to go backwards before you can go forward. You know, in 2002, we figured Apple sales went down 38%. Yet Apple's done okay. You know, sometimes you have to do that. But our sales were down 19%, not 15%. And to me, it was all part of the plan. It really didn't bother me. But boy, did it bother everybody else. And it really bothered them. As the months went by and our sales stayed low, you know, the board, employees, investors, you know, they all struggled with it. They all wanted to go back to the old JCPenney model. Well, I had this amazing discovery. I not only was on my own when I went to JCPenney, I was on my own at JCPenney, except for a handful of people, a couple are in the room today, who came with me. Within a few short months, all that belief turned to grief. The board abandoned me largely. The team that really never believed in me to change abandoned me. The media turned on me. I'd come back here, my friends treated me like I was at my own funeral, except for my son Will, who's here today, my wife, a few close friends. I really didn't have support. All I had was myself, a large pool of tears. It was by far the darkest point in my sunny life ever. And it became clear after a few short months that my dream to turn around JCPenney was not going to work. It's hard to change an organization that doesn't want to change. It's hard to innovate a place that kind of prefers to stand pat. And that's not a criticism, that's just the nature of a lot of large organizations that have been around a long time. But I realized I was a round peg in a square hole. I never felt that way before. For the first time in my life, I'd look in the mirror and I really didn't think I was that pretty. I kind of, you know, maybe, you know, you're really not that smart. Maybe I'm not that gifted. Maybe I was just lucky. You know, a lot of kids apply to Stanford. Maybe I got the admissions person on a good day. Maybe I got to Target at the right time. Maybe Apple, it wasn't about the stores we created, it was just we had great products. You know, I kind of lost my self-confidence. My self-esteem was shaken to the bone. But rather than swimming in my pool of tears, I turned them over to God. Not like Diane did with her health, like Vanessa did when she had her baby. And for the first time in my life, I discovered the gift of solitude. You know, I discovered that solitude is not being alone, it's not being quiet. It's daring to stand in the presence of God and to listen. And it was easy for me to practice solitude. I had a lot of time on my hand, believe it or not. You see, JCPenney is located down in Texas, and I'd commute down there during the week, and I stayed in a hotel 4 nights a week. And I spent every evening by myself. You know, every time I went online, all I'd read is about how bad Ron was doing at JCPenney, so I didn't want to go online. I'd turn on the TV on CNBC, and there'd be Kramer, you know, worst retail CEO ever. No, worst CEO ever, excuse me. And it just wasn't fun to hear. And then I'd go out to dinner in Dallas, and everyone recognized me because I was on the paper all the time. So I stayed home. I literally stayed home every night by myself, and in my aloneness, I discovered the grace of God. I had this empty space in my schedule and my soul for God to enter, and He did. It took some time, but I eventually learned how to listen, how to discover God's words. It's through reading, and it's the Bible, and it's quiet time. John 16:20. You will weep and mourn, but your pain will turn into joy. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. I discovered as I made God the center of my life, my sense of self wasn't dependent at all on what the world thought or what anyone wrote. It was completely dependent on my relationship with God. No matter how bad the day was, I felt such comfort when I got home in that hotel room. God loved me the way I was, not because I was good, not because of anything I did, not because of anything I did for Him, just because. That's God. You know, God created each of us in His own image. We're all designed to play our little role and his job is to spend his lifetime trying to perfect us. And sometimes we get into tough spots, so he can kind of shine us up a little bit. And as I discovered this, suddenly my job became liberating. I felt a little like the younger child in the prodigal son. I had left for the wilderness in Texas. I had squandered everything, my reputation, money, confidence, and while I didn't run home, as I stood in the presence of God in the hotel room, I felt one hand on my shoulder, another on my back, and I truly felt he loved me. In my grief, I discovered God's grace. There was a beautiful quote from Julia Cameron that inspired me. Whatever happens to me in life, I must believe that somewhere in the mess, and I had a big mess, or madness of it all, there's a sacred potential, a possibility for wondrous redemption in the embracing of all that is. How do you embrace life in the middle of sorrow? During my last months at JCP, I truly tried to embrace all that was. I tried to fly above the clouds with God by my sides. Sure, I was disappointed, but I wasn't depressed. Sure, I was sad, but I wasn't angry. I grew through my grief, and pretty soon that presence I felt in the hotel room was with me every moment of the day. On the outside, I was hurting. On the inside, I was gaining strength. One of the great lessons I learned there was how to love. Believe it or not, I learned to love all of my haters at JCP, and I think they didn't like it very well. I've always loved Luke 10, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, strength, and love your neighbors as yourself. I realized my neighbors in Dallas were the employees, my board members, the press. Everyone was put in my path. And I didn't have to like them, but I had to learn to love them. It was really hard. I had some senior people on my team who'd lie to me every day. They'd tell me one thing and tell their teams another, but I realized, they're just trying to survive. They have families, they want to keep their position. So I had empathy for them, in spite of what they might have done to me. I found the board members who kind of gave up pretty quickly. Just because they didn't agree with what I viewed the future, they were just trying to do their job to protect the company. So I had to learn to love board members who didn't really support me very well. And even the press, they're just doing their job. Some of them work to entertain, some try to tell the truth, but they were created by the same Father. So if you're a Christian, you got to love them too. Martin Luther King taught us to have an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. The love of God operating in the human heart. Dr. King said we love people not because they possess some divine spark. We love them because God loves them. And we have to love them too. So I learned to love at JCPenney. I learned a lot of business lessons about going too fast, about not putting the right team together, about making some strategic errors. But one thing kept haunting me, why did God have me go to JCPenney? Why did he let me make this outwardly awful decision? There had to be more. So I kept trying to find it. I could feel it, I couldn't find it. And then one evening I read the 23rd Psalm, and I couldn't get past the first sentence. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I was convicted. I shall not want. You see, I wanted to turn around JCPenney. Nobody else really did. God had given me so much in work at Target, at Apple, my family, my friends, but I wanted more. I wasn't satisfied. In many ways, I think he finally said, enough. I realized my whole life I'd never been satisfied with God's gifts. And God wanted me to learn not to want, but to be grateful for the boundless gifts he'd poured out to me. Eventually, that led me to reach the conclusion, why have 100,000 employees go through a challenging transformation just because I wanted to? And I told the board after a difficult year, if you want to go back, I'll step out of the way. And I offered to resign on multiple occasions. And 15 months after I started, the board accepted my resignation. There was one last blast of press criticizing me, but it really didn't bother me. Because through that time in the hotel room, my strength was founded on God's love and grace, not what the world thought. I was cleansed of arrogance. I was cleansed of self. I was cleansed of a desire for reputation. I had gained humility. And finally, I did not want. My last day was one of my best. I felt blessed. I felt free. And I finally was home again. Well, after that experience, which was very hard, I doubted I would ever work again. You know, I'd kind of reached somewhat of the pinnacle. I'm a CEO of a big company. I was 55 years old. I didn't have to work, so I took time to reflect. I began meeting weekly with John Ortberg, who's a good friend of mine, seems like he is with you, Diane, and Peter Stamos, and we talked about work and faith. And I told them, despite that tough 17th month at Penny's, I really feel blessed. And John's advice was simple: when you're blessed, you got to be a blessing. So I decided to spend a year and do nothing but make myself available to people. And I had a lot of calls. I think people felt really sorry for me and wanted me to do something. So, limiting myself to about 3 a day, I met with startups and individuals. And during that year, I also contemplated my career. And I realized that I personally feel God's pleasure when I work. I love working on teams. And I discovered that when you apply God's values to work, they really make a difference. And I look back, the best points in my career, the best days at Apple, at Target, when we did that. You know, example, at Apple, we don't use sacred terms, we use secular terms. But the entire stores were set up to enrich lives, kind of like Diane's doing at Reboot. It was about changing lives. And we used to say, when someone buys their first product, we're launching a relationship. When they come back for training, we're deepening a relationship. When they are getting help with the Genius Bar, we're restoring a relationship. Because what's broken is not their computer, it's their relationship, their trust in Apple. And I realized that what work really is at its best, it's when love's made visual. Work really is love made visual. You know, it's back to the neighbor thing. Our neighbors are our family and our friends and our loved ones, but it's also our colleagues at work, our customers, and our business partners. You know, when Christ was here, when he saw a need, he addressed it. He saw someone hungry, he fed. He saw someone sick, he healed. He made love visual every day. Why can't we do it at work? I now realize when you see someone at the Genius Bar, helping, it's love made visual. When you see an older employee mentoring a young employee, it's love made visual. When you design a stunning store like the Fifth Avenue glass cube that represents all Apple stands for, it's a beautiful thing. And it's also love made visual. We make love visual through work, through culture, through people, through kindness, and we can do it every day. Once I began to understand that, it started to hit me, what if you could build a company around the idea of making love visual? And so a few months later, Tom Suter, a good friend, and I started a company to do this. Well, it's a secret for you, but on the outside, we deliver consumer electronics. What we really do is deliver joy. We are working to reimagine work in a mobile world and to deliver the first, smart last mile with a smile. We even named our company Enjoy. And every day I report to God. He's the chairman of the board. And he's blessed me again. You know, we're 3 years into it, but we're kind of off to the races. It feels like the best days at Target, the early days at Apple. Might be the best work I've done yet. But whether it is or isn't, doesn't really matter. You know, I wake up every day standing in the presence of God, and he guides me. God is good. He's been available to Vanessa, Diane, to me. All you have to do is slow down and listen. Find some quiet space in your life. Let God be present. As I look back, I'm thankful for so many things, but largely for that huge pool of tears. They're probably still on that Florida hotel in Dallas. They might not run out the room anymore. I'm thankful for the grief I experienced during that time at JCPenney. But most importantly, I'm thankful for God's grace. As I close, my prayer is that you'll each discover God's all-embracing love in the middle of your challenge, a love that truly will meet you in your everyday moments if you let him, a love that will help you look beyond your grief, beyond your loss, and as Henri Nouwen wrote so beautifully, a God who will turn your mourning, that's with you, into dancing. Thank you. You stay up here.
Wasn't that wonderful? It's, what struck me as I've gotten to know Ron a little bit over these last several weeks is humility for all that he's done. I mean, and I think that was actually before J.C. Penney. I've talked to some former Apple employees who said that was one of the characteristics of Ron. But wasn't it a wonderful talk, so many takeaways, daring to stand in the presence of God. This is Silicon Valley. How many of us can slow down and really be in the presence of God? A wonderful lesson for us all. So thank you so much. I'd like to invite Diane Flynn to come back up. We can go over this way. So Diane, I have a question for you. I think you know Ron in some way. Is that right?
I do.
Okay, tell us how.
That's my mic. So if you recall the two faces I woke up in the hospital room at age 15, this was one of them. This is my brother.
Brother and sister, amazing. What a team, what an amazing family you must have to raise children like you, with humility, with brains, in such a faith that you have. So let me first ask, though, is there any sibling rivalry?
He keeps following me everywhere I go.
And Diane says that because I think Ron is older than Diane.
Definitely. Much.
So sibling, how about you, Ron? Any sibling rivalry?
No, honestly, no. I mean, we're so lucky. My brother Dwight's here today. We grew up with 3 kids that have all gotten along forever, and I just wish the best for Diane, as I know she does for me, and we're pretty lucky in that way.
Well, isn't that great? So a little bit about your family then, I'd like to hear. It must have been an amazing family you grew up in. And so, Diane, the first question for you is, what about maybe you're talking a little bit about your upbringing, or maybe your relationship with your dad? How did that influence your life?
Well, the theme of today is joy. And when I think of our father, he lived with a constant joy. He had, how many, 8 cancer?
7 or 8.
7 or 8 types of cancer throughout his life. It's in the genes, I guess. And yet, he never lost his faith. In fact, he would send faxes every single night before email existed. Every night. It was 10 points, 10 points of the day. And he would end every single one with the line, "The best is yet to come." And then when email came around, we'd get these every day to the whole family. "The best is yet to come." And when he was in his last days and he knew the end was near, he met with our minister, and he went through the service, and we were sitting bedside, and he went through the songs and the verses, and he had everything planned. And he said to the pastor, he said, "Got it all figured out, we're all ready to go, just don't have the date." But we ended up engraving "The best is yet to come" on his tombstone, because he just was filled with this joy that many of you I know him, and I don't think he had a down day in his life, and I think it was the joy filled because of the Holy Spirit. I don't think so. I know so. He talked about it all the time.
Isn't that wonderful? And Ron, how about you? Can you tell me a little bit more about the family and your relationship with your mom?
Yeah, I'll talk briefly about my mom. We had 2 great parents. My dad was kind of the long-term visionary. My mom was the doer. She practiced her faith through work. And boy, if she had a heart for you, no one loved you more than my mom. And I don't think she ever missed a sports game that I played in. I don't think she ever missed a party, a card, a note. She was always present for people that she had a heart for. And this idea, when you grow up as a kid, knowing you're loved gives you such strong self-esteem. And it gives you the courage to take risks, because and it comes back to it, someone loves you. And it's not unlike the unconditional love you discovered, having your son. Yeah. I grew up with that. And that was a gift. And that came from my mom and dad, but really my mom, because she was there every moment, from breakfast to the sports games to everything. She was always there for me.
Wow. Amazing. One more question for you is, So how does that translate? Diane, you have 3 children. Ron, you have 2. Is that correct? So how does your parents, the way you were brought up, how does that relate to the way that you bring up your children?
I'll go first here. It's really expensive. My son Will and I started this tradition of going out to breakfast on the way to school when I drop him off. And we have the record 64 straight days at Ann's Coffee Shop in Menlo Park. But the point I learned is you got to be present with your kids. And you got to find ways to weave yourself into their schedule. And for me, for Will, it's always been sitting around the table at breakfast and other things. For my daughter, we talk twice a day. But it's that ongoing relationship. And I think when you have kids, a lot of people fall in the trap of being kind of I'm the parent. I've got to discipline. I've got to be hard. Well, I'm a believer you either motivate people through love or fear. And I'm just a big believer in love, that warm embrace. And so I love my kids like my parents love me.
Great. Diane, any other comments?
Well, I would absolutely echo Ron. We really try to be present at the kids being here today. My brother driving in with his wife from Arizona to be here. My parents were all about presence. I would just add that one thing important to me growing up, when we said our nightly prayers with the kids, we'd go through, now I lay me down to sleep, but we'd always end with, and tonight I'm thankful for. And I'd have them each rattle off whatever they were thankful for. And I think it's really instilled an attitude of gratitude. And I think that's life-changing, and I think it's life-giving. And I think God calls us to be grateful in everything. So that would be the one thing that's important to me.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to invite Vanessa up as well, and because I want to pray over.
Tell the story. Was that the other face?
We're actually brother
related.
and sister. Can't you tell?
Well, actually, you are.
Yes.
Brothers and sisters in Christ,
That's
right?
right.
So they are related.
That's right.
So, Vanessa, I'll put you on the spot a bit. I wasn't planning to ask a question, but I'll ask. You didn't have a chance to talk about Love Never Fails.
Yeah.
Can you give a story about maybe a miracle you experience? You mentioned you have miracles all the time. Can you tell about maybe an example of a miracle that happens through Love Never Fails?
Oh, sure. There are so many. I think the most visible miracles have been when we've gone out. We actually do street outreach once a month. We go to places in the Bay Area where people are being sold in plain sight. And the average age of a person that is being trafficked in the U.S. is 12 to 14. And so, as you can imagine, the sense of urgency to get out into the street and actually find our children is very great for me. And so a team, we usually are maybe a team of 20 to 40 people, will go out between 9 p.m. and midnight on third Saturdays of the month. And just a couple stories that come to mind. One in particular was of a woman that we actually rescued from the street in San Francisco. What was so remarkable to me was that I had met her in the Tenderloin on one corner, and if you've ever been out with me, I really walk with a great deal of confidence. I'm not afraid. And so there she was on the corner. She had a broken arm, and she looked as if she had been beaten up, and she was very scared. And the Lord told me to just go up to her and hug her. And so I walked toward her, and I asked her if I could give her a hug. And what I didn't know was that she actually had a knife in her hand, because the person who had abused her, who was her exploiter, was standing across the street, and she planned to stab him. But because of my hug, I was able to knock the knife out of her hand into the gutter. And after that moment, she decided she wanted to leave, and she got in the car with us, and her life was changed from that point forward.
Thank you, Vanessa. I'd like to pray for the three of them, and then we'll finish up in a few minutes. What amazing stories, aren't they? Stories of faith. Lord, I do thank you for Vanessa, for Diane, and for Ron. I thank you for the example that they give us, people of faith, people who have gone through all sorts of different kinds of affliction and have found you in it. Lord, and as they've gone through it, wasn't pleasant, but they also found joy and found your presence. So I thank you for the examples that they've given to all of us here. And as was mentioned from the podium, they also look at their work as their ministry, and that's a lesson for us all as well. So I thank you for that, Lord. And I pray your blessings on each one of them as they go forward with their business activities and their nonprofit work. I pray your blessings on them, and they may continue to be a blessing to all they come in touch with. I pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Another round of applause for them. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan. Amazing people, aren't they? Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thank you again for coming and being here. I just have a couple of comments that I'd like to make, and then we're going to do it. There's a very special time. Well, you'll have a chance to share around the table. I'm sure that you've had some thoughts on what you've experienced today, so you'll have that in a moment. But a couple of comments, a couple of things that really struck me, and that is the power of storytelling. Don't we love hearing people's stories? Especially stories of how God has transformed their life. And in this case, it's often through affliction or something else. Storytelling, very, very important. And as I mentioned earlier, one of our goals here at the Silicon Valley Prayer Breakfast is to encourage conversations about faith. Storytelling is one great way to have conversations. And I know people here, we all have a story. We all have different kinds of stories. In some, it might be how God has touched us, transformed our lives as it has with our speakers. For others, it might be that we're angry with God. We've walked away from faith in one way or another. Well, I would encourage everyone here to share your stories, no matter where you are in your faith journey, because we can gain knowledge, can gain insight, when we can see how God has touched our life. So storytelling is one thing that I would suggest. The second thing, this topic that we've had for the day, which is joy in a challenging world. And again, it doesn't seem like those fit together. And in the case of each one of our speakers, Diane mentioned that she was angry with God for a while, and Ron talked about the tears that he had. So joy in a challenging world doesn't mean that we're happy going through it. It's certainly not a happy time as we go through these difficulties and these afflictions. But as a follower of Christ, there is a joy, as our speakers talked about. There is a joy that comes with knowing that we can grow closer to God in the process of going through those afflictions. And I would say it's almost like a quiet confidence that we have. And in some ways, a contentment. It's not that we're happy, but through that process, we gain a closer relationship with God. He's often transforms our character in many ways, and we can feel that joy. So it's a great lesson for all of us. So now it's your turn to talk around the table. So the subject again today was finding joy in a challenging world. So the question I have, and the question I think will be shown on the screen right now to discuss is this: what is your experience in finding joy? And you could relate that to some of what you've heard from our speakers today. So what is your experience in finding joy? So if you'll take around 10 minutes or so, talk around the table, and I know it's going to be noisy in here, but when I stand back at the podium, if I could get your attention, and then we'll close out. So you can begin the discussion. What is your experience finding joy? Here we go. Now, I don't mean for everybody to kiss. That usually happens at a wedding, right? But I wanted to get your attention because we do make a promise that we end on time. We'll end on time again today at 8:30. But there's plenty of time to hang around. I said networking is important. We have this room for I don't know how long, at least a half hour, maybe an hour. So hang around, talk to people, pass on your business cards. Please visit the sponsors out in the hallway. So again, thank you so much for coming. I want to again repeat, if you have those response cards, to fill them out, pass them in. You'll go on our email list. And our speakers will be up front, so feel free to come up and talk to them. So if you wouldn't mind now, Vanessa, Ron, and Diane, if you could come up front and spread out a little bit, because I'm sure people are going to want to talk to you. So again, thank you so much for coming. again, to get this crowd here at Silicon Valley at this time of day, I think is an amazing thing. So thank you so much, and I'll end in prayer. Lord, I do thank you for this morning, that we can enjoy this time together, and I expect that each of us heard some message of inspiration, and I pray that we take that message to heart and take the next step of faith, whatever that may be. I pray that we will take the initiative to listen to and to share stories with others. And I pray that we will find that special joy that you offer as we face challenging circumstances. And as we go with our other activities today, I pray that we will be a blessing to others and that you will bless us. Amen. Thank you.